it's just loneliness. It isn't. And that misunderstanding is why most people wouldn't survive it. Psychology, behavioral history, and long-term confinement research all point to the same conclusion. Humans don't fail in isolation because of silence. They fail because isolation removes the systems that regulate identity, emotion, and time. This outcome isn't unusual. It's repeatable. The popular myth is simple. If you're mentally strong, you'll be fine. Willpower, self-control, a tough mind that can sit in discomfort and not collapse. That belief fails quickly because it misunderstands what the mind is. Most people overestimate their internal stability. Human cognition is not a closed system. It is an adaptive system that stays stable by constantly exchanging information with the outside world. Routine tells the brain what matters. Other people tell the brain what's real. Consequences tell the brain what's safe. Friction tells the brain what needs adjusting. Isolation removes all of that at once. And when the external regulators disappear, the brain does not become peaceful. It becomes unregulated. In the beginning, people mistake this for freedom. No interruptions. No obligations. No social pressure. No noise. But what they're actually feeling is the first stage of drift. Because when nothing presses back, everything inside you grows louder. Not wiser. Louder. The first thing that expands is thought repetition. A normal mind is constantly interrupted by life, by errands, by messages, by micro-conflicts, by the small demands that force attention to move. When those interruptions vanish, thoughts stop being processed and start being recycled. The same idea returns again and again, not because it's important, but because nothing replaces it. That recycling creates a false sense of meaning. People start treating loops as insight. They begin rereading their own mind like it's a document worth studying. It isn't. It's a machine looking for input. And when it can't find input, it manufactures intensity. This is where most people begin to fail, because they still think the problem is loneliness. So they try to cope emotionally. They try to soothe. They try to distract. They try to comfort themselves. But the threat isn't sadness. The threat is the loss of calibration. Humans don't maintain sanity through inner peace. They maintain sanity through accurate feedback, and isolation removes accuracy first. A stable mind is not the mind with the most optimism. It is the mind with the most correction. Correction comes from contrast, other perspectives, environmental consequences, time pressure, social expectation. With correction gone, perception becomes private. And private perception always drifts toward distortion. A person alone long enough begins to treat internal sensations as evidence. A tight chest becomes something is wrong. A restless night becomes I'm deteriorating. A random memory becomes I'm being warned. Not because the person is dramatic, because the mind is a pattern detector under deprivation. Once deprivation starts, it looks for patterns in itself. If this perspective resonates, subscribe. This channel exists to explain what most people avoid. Now, the deeper failure is identity. Most people believe they know who they are. They don't. Identity is not a truth you discover and keep. Identity is a structure reinforced through repetition and recognition. In everyday life, identity is stabilized by roles. You are someone's employee, someone's partner, someone's friend, someone's neighbor, someone who has to show up, respond, perform, adjust. Those roles are not just social labels. They are psychological anchors. They create continuity. Isolation dissolves roles. And when roles dissolve, identity becomes abstract. Abstract identity sounds like this: I'm the kind of person who, I'm someone who values, I'm someone who would never. It is theoretical, and theoretical identity cannot regulate behavior under stress. Because behavior is regulated by immediacy, schedule, pressure, consequence. Without those, the mind becomes permissive, not relaxed. Permissive. It stops insisting. It stops initiating. It starts postponing everything. This is how people break in isolation without noticing. They don't explode. They decelerate. They wake up later. They delay tasks. They stop grooming. They stop tracking time. They stop distinguishing days. Then they stop believing their actions matter. Not because they became lazy, because meaning requires witnesses, if not people, then at least structure. Isolation removes witnesses. So the brain stops paying for effort. Motivation, in most people, is not a personality trait. It is a response to friction. Remove friction, and motivation collapses into vague intention. That's why mental toughness is not the deciding factor. The deciding factor is whether a person can generate structure when structure is not demanded. Most can't, because they've never had to. They've mistaken external regulation for inner strength their entire lives. Time is the next collapse. Humans require patterned time to remain coherent, not just clocks. Patterned time, differences between days, anticipation, deadlines, contrast between effort and rest. Isolation flattens time into one long surface. When days feel identical, memory stops encoding them distinctly. The brain compresses experience. Hours disappear because there are no markers. Weeks feel unreal because nothing distinguishes them. This creates a specific cognitive destabilization orientation loss. Not getting lost in space. Getting lost in sequence. What did I do yesterday? What day is it? How long have I felt like this? Was that last week or last month? When orientation weakens, decision-making weakens. Because decision-making depends on time perspective. You need a past you trust and a future you can imagine. Isolation erodes both. The past becomes a blur. The future becomes weightless. So the present becomes heavy. And when the present becomes heavy, the mind begins negotiating with itself. I'll do it later. Tomorrow is fine. It doesn't matter. No one will know. That internal negotiation is not harmless. It is the beginning of self-disrespect, because the mind learns that your decisions don't carry consequences. In normal life, consequences come from the world. In isolation, consequences must be self-generated. Most people have never trained that muscle, so they stop enforcing standards. Then they lose trust in themselves. Then they lose the ability to self-correct. This is why isolation doesn't just feel empty. It makes people morally and cognitively softer. Not kinder, softer. They begin to tolerate deterioration. Emotional self-predation is the next stage. Most people think emotions are caused by events. They're not. They're caused by interpretation. In isolation, interpretation has no counterweight. No one reflects you accurately. No environment interrupts you. No social consequences force recalibration. So emotions start feeding on themselves. Anxiety creates vigilance. Vigilance finds nothing. Nothing becomes threat. Sadness looks for explanation. Finds none. Turns inward. Guilt appears without cause, because guilt is a social emotion. It is the mind's attempt to simulate social judgment. In isolation, The mind manufactures judgment internally because it still expects it. This is how people become haunted by imagined criticism, not because they are fragile, because the brain is built for accountability. Remove accountability, and it recreates it. The replacement is harsher because it is unmoderated. This internal harshness produces shame. Shame then produces avoidance. Avoidance then produces more shame. And the loop tightens. What looks like depression in isolation is often a closed feedback loop. Emotion interpretation, self-judgment withdrawal. Intensified emotion. Without external disruption, the loop becomes self-sealing. At this point, people start seeking stimulation, not for pleasure, for regulation. They overeat, oversleep, scroll, pace, daydream, rehearse arguments, replay memories, create fantasies. These behaviors are not bad habits. They are attempts to create friction, to produce sensation strong enough to interrupt the loop. But when stimulation becomes regulation, it escalates, because the nervous system adapts. What was distracting becomes normal. Then it becomes insufficient. So the person needs more intensity to feel stable. This is how isolation quietly creates compulsion. Now add the most dangerous element, perception drift. When you live without feedback, you begin to treat your own interpretations as facts. You don't just feel anxious. You become convinced something is wrong. You don't just feel lonely. You become convinced you are abandoned. You don't just feel bored. You become convinced life is pointless. Certainty increases as evidence decreases. That's a predictable pattern. In closed systems, confidence does not come from truth. It comes from repetition. Isolation is a closed system. So confidence becomes meaningless. This is why people in prolonged isolation often become either paranoid or numb. Both are forms of reduced correction. Paranoia is hyper-meaning. Numbness is no meaning. Either way, accuracy is gone. And once accuracy is gone, survival becomes a math problem. Because survival is not about feeling good. It's about maintaining functioning, sleep, eating, hygiene, planning, impulse control, reality testing. Those are the actual survival skills in isolation. Most people don't train those skills. They outsource them. To work schedules, to relationships, to obligations, to social pressure, to fear of judgment. When those external forces disappear, people discover what was actually holding them together. It wasn't strength. It was structure. So the conclusion is already set. Prolonged isolation doesn't announce itself as danger. It presents itself as peace. No conflict. No demands. No noise. That's why it works. Humans survive hardship through friction. Isolation removes friction. What remains isn't clarity. It's exposure to unregulated thought, unanchored emotion, and an identity with no reinforcement. This isn't pessimism. It's pattern recognition. And patterns don't care what we believe.